In 1966, the U.S. military lowered its own standards and sent over 350,000 men to war who didn't qualify to serve. You'd think weakening your standards weakens your army. Instead, it strengthened something else entirely, just not for the men holding the rifles. Henry Williams failed the Army's entrance exam in 1965. A year later, the exam didn't matter. He was one of the men they called an opportunity. This is the story of who Project 100,000 actually built that opportunity for. By 1966, America had a math problem. The Vietnam War needed bodies, fast. But the draft had a built-in escape hatch, and everyone with money or a guidance counselor knew exactly where it was. College deferments, graduate school deferments, National Guard slots that conveniently never shipped overseas. If your father had a law degree, chances are you'd never see a jungle. The war machine needed fuel, and the fuel it wanted least was the fuel with connections. So the Pentagon had two options. Option 1, draft the sons of senators, professors, and donors, politically radioactive. Option 2, lower the bar at the bottom of the pool instead of touching the top. Guess which one they picked? Enter the Secretary of Defense, the same man who once ran Ford Motor Company by the numbers, who treated war the way he treated assembly lines, cold, optimized, measured in units. In August 1966, he announced a new initiative. He didn't call it a quota fix. He called it Project 100,000. The pitch was beautiful. America's poorest young men, many rejected for low test scores, missing teeth, minor health defects, would finally get their shot. The military would train them. The military would lift them, and they'd come home with skills, discipline, and a future. He folded it directly into the war on poverty. Same year as Head Start, same language as opportunity. We can give these men, he said, a chance to fully participate in the life of their country instead of being trapped in a backwater of ignorance and poverty. Beautiful words. Now look at the mechanism underneath them. To make this work, the Army didn't raise anyone up. It lowered the floor. The AFQT, the entrance exam that sorted recruits by mental category, had a cutoff. Below that line, you were unfit to serve. Project 100,000 simply erased the line. Men in Category 4, the lowest acceptable tier, men who had been turned away just 1 year earlier, were suddenly qualified. Wait, so the same man who got rejected in 1965 just walks back in 1966 and gets a rifle. Correct. Same man, same scores, different paperwork. Waivers covered minor physical defects too. Asthma, bad eyesight, missing fingers. None of it mattered anymore. You're in, the recruiter says, sliding the paperwork across the desk. Didn't I fail this exact test last year? You did. So what changed? The bar moved. You didn't. The men who filled this program weren't randomly distributed across America. They came overwhelmingly from poor families, from the rural South, from segregated school districts that had failed them years before the Army ever did. Historians estimate that Black recruits made up a disproportionate share of Project 100,000 at a rate roughly double their share of the broader military. These weren't volunteers chasing glory. They were men with no deferment, no lawyer, no exit. Inside the barracks, they were given a cruel nickname that reduced them to a punchline. Not officially, just constantly. The nickname followed them before they ever reached the battlefield. Here's the part the brochures left out. The promise was training. Mechanics, electronics, skilled trades that would translate into a civilian career. The reality was different. Most of these men weren't funneled into classrooms. They were funneled into combat arms, infantry units, the exact roles needing the most replacements in Vietnam. Studies conducted after the war found that new standards men, as they were officially labeled, were assigned to combat duty at significantly higher rates than the average recruit, and saw their casualty rates run nearly twice as high as the rest of the force. So, the program built to lift the poorest Americans out of poverty sent a disproportionate share of them home in flag-draped coffins instead. Now ask the question the title promised. If the program failed the men it claimed to help, who exactly did it help? Follow the money and the politics, not the brochure. First, it solved a manpower crisis without touching the deferment system. Congress didn't have to debate ending college exemptions. Senators didn't have to explain to donors why their sons were suddenly eligible. The entire structural reason for sending the country's least powerful citizens to the most dangerous job remained untouched and unquestioned. Second, it let the administration claim a war on poverty win during a war that was rapidly losing public support on every other front. Want to look compassionate while you're escalating troop levels? Wrap the draft in welfare language. Same bodies. Better headline. Third, and this is the part most documentaries skip, it protected the institutions running the war from the one thing that actually ends wars early: outrage from people with power. The families who could call a congressman, who could organize a campaign, who could make front-page news when their son didn't come home. Those families were never in the pool. The men who filled Project 100,000 came from communities with the least political leverage in the country. Their grief didn't move policy. It barely moved newspapers. This is the actual mechanism behind every opportunity program of this kind. It isn't that nobody benefits. It's that the benefit and the cost get separated by class, geography, and who gets to be heard. The men carrying the rifles absorbed nearly all the risk. The system that built the war absorbed almost none of the consequences. By the time Project 100,000 wound down in the early 1970s, it had processed roughly 354,000 men. The Pentagon's own later evaluations quietly admitted that promised training and post-service outcomes never matched the pitch. No press conference announced that. No senator stood up to apologize. The program simply faded out the way it was built to operate in the first place, unnoticed by the people who didn't have to live inside it. Henry Williams came home in 1968. He didn't get the mechanic's certification the recruiter promised. He got 2 tours, a service record nobody asked to see, and a country that had already moved on to the next headline. Somewhere in a different zip code, a college sophomore renewed his deferment paperwork and never thought about either of them again. Decades later, the man behind it all called Vietnam a mistake. One of the great understatements in American political memory. He never specifically apologized for Project 100,000 by name. He didn't have to. The men it was built around were never positioned to demand one.